I want to bring in the host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Al, I wanted to talk to you about just the future of the Democratic Party and the future, most importantly, of the politics of inclusion for people of color, for women, for other minorities. Women are not a minority, but for other marginalized people after this election result.
I think that the future is going to be dependent on how determined we are to really coalesce and keep fighting and pushing in the areas that you're talking about, in terms of race and in terms of gender or sexual orientation. I think what a lot of people forget is that we had to fight for this in the first place. My grandparents couldn't vote in the South. So for you to go from grandparents 2 generations ago that couldn't vote in Alabama and Florida, respectively, to me running for president in 2004 was based on our continuing to fight. Many of us have no longer support issues, no longer get involved politically, and the result are the fighting happened on the other side. What happened in 2020? Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump. His crowd never stopped fighting. They come back in 24 and he wins again. We cannot surrender. We must be as determined and persistent as they are, because we're talking about our very rights, women's rights over their own body, which they voted statewide last night all over this country. Voting rights for blacks, affirmative action. We've got to be at least as diligent in terms of continuing to fight as they did. If they had been given up, Trump would not be where he is. We cannot surrender today because some people, for various reasons, did not come out and support Vice President Harris,
as you point
a far
out,
superior candidate.
The centuries, but the decades in our time of setbacks for the civil rights movements in this country until Lyndon Johnson and the Civil Rights Act, and then the setbacks again with the Voting Rights Act. Tim, I mean, it just seems as though it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Maybe 3 steps back. I think we'll have to wait and see about that. It's a little dark, but this is just what I think. Like, there, particularly on the Democratic side, which I'm a convert to, I guess. The word is progressive, right? Because there's this always thought that there's progress. That's why you get involved in politics, because of progress. I think that the job of progressives or of people in the pro-democracy coalition or whatever it is, really is protecting against things being fought back. Regression. Thank you. Regression. Like being a, sorry for the pun, but like being a bulwark against regression of rights and against regression of institutions that we've come to expect both here and abroad, because that's what they want to do. I mean, they want to unravel the administrative state. They want to unravel the way that our alliances work in the world. And I think protecting against that is really the obligation of Democrats going forward.
How much is what we see important? And I ask this in 2 ways, Simone. One is, we talked about the crowd there, but they are first-time voters who probably largely got involved and excited because it was Kamala Harris, and now they're going to see someone standing up there conceding. I also looked at probably half a dozen known people who wrote about what they think the possible cabinet would look like under Donald Trump. We don't know. They don't know. But they have some sourcing on it, right? It's largely men, and it's largely white men. So after an Obama administration, after a Biden administration, where people who maybe wanted to get into politics could look and see someone who looked like them, they have likely less opportunity. How much does what people see, whether it's who's running the country or for these young people who thought they had something to get excited about, how much does it matter?
I think it matters. I do. I think that who the president is matters. I think that if one of the things that comes out of this election is that there were a lot of organizers across the country in places like Florida and Georgia and whatnot who were of the belief that I'm telling people to focus on local because the presidency, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are much of the same. There were Democratic, well, not, they wouldn't call themselves Democrats, but there were organizers that said that. And I think one of the things that should come out of this, my friend DeRay McKesson said this today, is that who the president is does matter. You cannot local election your way to a representative democracy and think you're going to be okay. I would just say that for the young people out there that are looking at this saying, oh my goodness, politics does not work. The system only works if you work it. We do live in a participatory democracy and people must participate. There was record early vote turnout for black voters in Georgia, record early vote turnout for black voters in Philadelphia, and same thing for early vote in Detroit now. The same day lagged, and the question that people have to answer is why? What happened in the collar counties? But I just think in general, your participation can change things. You don't always, sometimes you leave it all on the field and you are not successful. And that's a hard reality, but to Tim's point and the point of so many people I've talked to today, folks must continue to keep fighting, but make no mistake, it will be rough for a while. It may not it may not come as swiftly and as, just like, racism is still there, but, people just aren't walking around using the N-word. It looks different. So will this rough time. And we should be honest about that.
Rev, let me ask you about enthusiasm, which Simone just pointed to. Why do you think the turnout ultimately in this race will be lower than 2020? It looks like it's on that track right now.
I think that in many ways you have to give credit to the fact that Kamala Harris, the vice president, in 107 days got up a campaign that most people take 2 to 3 years to do and did an excellent job. She was not as known as a person to a lot of the country. She did that, and she did it in a exemplary way. I think that's one of it. Second, I think that we have been inundated with misinformation, and you had to try to break through a lot of misinformation to get the truth to a lot of voters, which is why I think the later polls she started going up, but it was not enough time to break through. Had she been given more time, I think that it would have been clearly more to her advantage. But I don't think you could have had a better candidate. The other part is the unspoken thing for many people is you've got to deal with the continued gender bias and race bias in this country. Some people just were not going to vote for a woman of color in an interracial marriage and living in the White House, and have a woman as president of any color. And we've got to deal with that and have those tough conversations if we're ever going to get by this.